Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on what's happening on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging within the construction industry. The show is brought to you in partnership with Place Engage, a data-driven platform for more successful public consultation and stakeholder engagement for your next development project. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sally-Anne Sherry, Managing Director at Ecocem UK and Ireland. Sally-Anne, thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to see you again.
You're welcome. I'm
Um,
just halfway through my first 90 days at Ecosem, so it's
that's
early days for me, but yeah,
That's it.
happy to chat.
I did introduce you as the new managing director at Ecocem UK and Ireland, and I should have said the very new managing director. So we have, of course, spoken to your predecessor, Susan McGarry, who is such a powerhouse and so inspiring across the construction industry, and she has been so inspiring across the construction industry in Ireland, and now she's going to be inspiring on a European level. So very best of luck to her on that. But for anybody who might not who might not be familiar with Ecosem or might not have heard our previous conversation with Susan McGarry, you might just take people through Ecosem UK and Ireland, what the company is and how it works.
Yeah, so I think in all my recent conversations since I joined Ecosem, I've started them all with the difference between cement and concrete because when I was prior to this, I probably needed that explanation myself. So cement is an ingredient in concrete, and concrete is what we see everywhere in the footpaths, the buildings, the piers. So that's concrete, and cement is an ingredient in concrete, and it's only actually 10% of concrete. But cement makes up 7% of global CO2 emissions. So it's obviously a very problematic product. And it's something that Ecosem have been working for many years to come up with low carbon solutions to replace what's called the clinker in cement, which is the highly polluting element of cement. So for over 20 years, Ecosem have been producing something called GGBS, which is a low carbon cement, and that is a waste product from the steel industry. We have some partners in Europe where we receive raw material and we bring it into our plants and put it through. So it looks a bit like um, sand, and we put it through our plant and it comes out like a fine powder. And that is what we call GGBS, ground granulated blast furnace slag. So try and say that tongue twister. And that is the product that has been on the market for over 20 years here in Ireland. And we have a lot of customers across Ireland. It's in a lot of buildings already. And you would see reference a lot to the main sort of landmark buildings that GGBS was used in, like the Convention Centre, the Aviva Stadium, in more recent years, and went into a lot of office developments across town. One example is the Arthur Cox office at Earlsfort Terrace, and you would often see it used in projects that are near water or have exposure to water because GGBS has a very high chloride resistance. So, for example, at piers, and at the moment, one of our customers called Harrington's in Mayo are using GGBS in the Rossaville fishery harbour. And they might, those types of projects could use up to 70% GGBS as clinker replacement. So that is kind of the past and the present in terms of what we're using today. But Ecosem have been putting a lot of time and effort and investment into technology. And they have recently received a European technical assessment for our new low carbon technology called ACT. And I think the easiest way for me to explain it is to call it a recipe. So it's like a recipe for cement, but it's using products that are widely available. It's using less energy, less water. It can be made more or less in existing plants. And we should have that ready very shortly. We're going for the CE mark and with an aim to getting that to market by 2026 at the latest. So that is sort of the future. We currently produce and sell GGBS, but we're moving towards ACT.
Very good. And just for somebody like me who actually did need it explained, I can remember about a decade ago when somebody actually breaking down kind of the difference, not just the difference between cement and concrete, but actually sharing their frustration at how poorly this was known across the industry, not just outside of the industry. So I think that that's actually a very good place to start, because when we have language that we use ubiquitously, and you probably hear it being misdescribed all the time. So actually, it's a really good starting point there from a messaging. But in terms of the moving to the new product, this ACT technology, I suppose Ecocem, first of all, has form, having used a waste product essentially over the past 20 years, but the sustainability focus has really narrowed over that 20-year period. So whereas previously, I think sustainability meant something wider, I think now in terms of when we're looking and we've got such stringent targets that arguably aren't stringent enough at all, and yet in Ireland, certainly we're going to miss them, whatever about for the rest of Europe. When you're dealing with a product that is responsible for 7% of CO2 emissions, how does that shape the innovation and where you decide to invest in innovation? And I suppose how drastic you need to be in the steps you're going to take?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you look at how much time and investment Ecosem have put into the future technology, so like over 15% of our workforce are completely focused on research and development and have been for a long time. So we have recognized the sort of urgency involved and have dedicated a lot of investment to this space. And a lot of the proposals up to now haven't been scalable, in that they might solve the solution in the short to medium term, but not in the long term. Because, like, for example, with GGBS, which is really, really good product to use right now, it is a finite resource. And even if you were to replace, you were trying to replace all of the clinker used in Europe in any one year, GGBS could only replace 15% of that clinker because of the limit on supply of GGBS. So that has been where the focus has been on, to try and find a globally scalable solution. And the solution that our product ACT, or our technology ACT, has provided is something that it can be scaled right across the world, and it can be licensed to big cement companies and big concrete companies right across the world, so that they can use that technology, and it in broad numbers, it will reduce regular cement by 70%. And that will help, like when you think that 7% of global CO2 emissions, if you could remove 70% really quickly, that would make a huge difference globally. And I suppose that's the benefit of having a really big exposure, is that, you know, one solution could make a huge impact on it. And that's what we believe ACT can do.
And but then taking a global look, because Ecosem is one company, one organization across the ecosystem, globally, where are the innovation efforts coming from? You know, where do you see the direction of travel?
Well, we are, I suppose, globally we're a small player, but we have footprints all over the world. And like our experience in going to far-flung areas in the world is that none of them are as far ahead in terms of technology as we are. They have been concentrated more on Portland cement and things like GGBS, but they haven't been spending as much time and effort in the future technology. So our experience in going to these other countries are that we are the furthest ahead in this space.
Okay, very good. And then in terms of how the built environment is delivered, again, globally, we can see that that's shifting, and it's shifting in a number of different ways. You know, sustainability, environmental sustainability has been a huge driver, but there are, of course, other considerations across social, and a community-driven approach. But when we take a look, you know, pulling back from the global, take a look at Ireland, you know, we're looking at an environment where we are seeing an undersupply across the built environment, similar to the UK, and challenges to scaling delivery. So whether it's across housing, infrastructure, commercial, data centres, pharma, everything we need to survive comfortably, we're seeing a shift in how the built environment is being delivered, whether it's through off-site or modern methods of construction. Where does your innovation sit into that? Are you supporting players delivering across delivering the built environment, or where do you sit?
Well, I suppose we're an ingredient in the future built environment, and we're currently an ingredient in buildings in our GGBS supply. But in our future ACT supply, we believe that this is just a complete comparison to existing cement, in that it's the same strength and durability, if not better, than current cement. And I suppose we have the same role to play today and in the future. We look at different technologies where you have, the print, the print building, and anything that sort of involves concrete and cement. We will pivot to make sure that we're there and available. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we don't expect it to change in terms of how you use it today and how you use it in the future. It's the same way of using it, but that it will be a much lower carbon footprint.
Yeah, and actually you touched on a really interesting kind of emerging technology there in terms of, say, 3D printing of concrete homes. And we know in Ireland, FutureCast are providing great training and pilot projects and schemes supporting innovating how this technology is used. Does your product currently work with say 3D printing, or are you exploring that technology for use?
Yeah, we're exploring it because I suppose that's all new as well. And my understanding is that they have to do it in very fast layers. And we then are trying to work with them to make sure that we can add mixtures that make sure that it sets as quick as possible in order to keep up with their programs. So yeah, like we're working with those types of players as well.
Because Ecocem is a global company and absolutely recognized as a global leader, you might just actually talk us through some of the funding that has been made available. I know that's probably what most people in the industry will be very familiar with Ecocem in terms of the headlines that it's made. Not just in terms of fundraising that it's done, but where those funds have been raised, because it's a real indication. And I suppose it's a huge point of credibility there when you're being recognized as an energy solution and a low carbon solution there. So you might just talk us through some of the funding rounds and really some of the key milestones that the company has hit over the past number of years.
Yeah, so the most recent and I suppose well-known funding round was the investment by Breakthrough Energy Ventures in 2021 and 2021. And that's the Bill Gates Fund. And that is specifically focused on green and sustainable businesses. And I suppose there's one thing in terms of the funding that you receive, but the other part is the credibility associated with receiving funding from that type of resource and the doors that they can open. And my understanding is that they have been very beneficial and very helpful for us in opening doors right across the world. And that, and I suppose, all focus in the last couple of years has been on creating this low carbon technology. It is now available and it's up to us to bring it through that system. So we've received the European Technical Assessment recently. We're looking for the CE mark later this year. And then we're doing trials with our customers in Europe and here in Ireland as well. And we're hoping to reach the open market properly by 2026. So that is really the main sort of aim for the last couple of years, and it is what our focus will be for the next few years. So in the meantime, we produce and sell GGBS, and we have a lot of customers across Ireland that use GGBS, but the future will be in ACT.
Yeah, and look, that's a very clear pathway, and I think you outlined that very well so that the industry know what's coming, they understand what's available now and what's in the pipeline, because obviously when you're as an ingredient of a construction product, all contractors, any project owners delivering in the built environment, they now need to be much more mindful in terms of the materials that they're using, how they're deploying that, again, how they're delivering the built environment. So actually, suddenly, all of the supply chain and the sustainability credentials of all of the supply chain is being called into question in a way that it simply hasn't been before. And I think there's maybe an adjustment period, a period of education. You will have to educate the industry to understand maybe where the new offering fits. And I think in terms of testing and getting getting the certifications that are required across jurisdictions, you would imagine in an era of innovation when we're trying to solve global problems that actually having to deal with regional testing, you would imagine there would be a better solution to that. But there doesn't appear to be. Are you still testing and verifying and seeking certifications in each region?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
understanding is that yes, but in terms of the new technology, once we get it through the European system, then it will have that European wide effect. But I suppose one of the things that I think, because I came from the property industry and I worked in property development for many years, it's only in recent times that it's occurred to me that I never really knew much about the ingredients that was going into the buildings that the companies that I worked for were building. And it's only now that I suppose I think it's really useful to raise awareness and for people to ask, is regular Portland cement going into my building or is it, a low carbon alternative? And then things like LEED certification, like it's an easy point score to use GGBS instead of cement. And there's different reasons why you'd use it in terms of strength and durability as well. But I just think it's one of those things that I didn't know much about before I joined here. And I think it would be really useful if I don't get through any other message other than to say, ask what's in your buildings and query if it's not a low carbon solution, why is it not? Because I think the architects and the engineers are very clued into building specifications, but a lot of real estate professionals aren't. And I think it's on us now to ask questions.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective from a project owner. And actually, I'm reminded, first of all, I'm actually surprised to hear that, but then maybe I shouldn't be surprised when actually I think people sometimes lump in the built environment together, whereas actually we know that from project owners to the delivery of construction, then back into the real estate process, the transaction that handles it, they are quite disconnected. There isn't a huge amount of knowledge sharing. There's a lot of blaming of each other goes on, but not a huge amount of knowledge sharing. And that's something that, yes, we would like to see improve. But what's really interesting when you talk about coming from a development background and maybe not questioning that in the past, only this week I was speaking to a new homes estate agent or auctioneer, and they were just talking about how buyers today, particularly buyers of new homes, they're so savvy. They're coming in and they are asking, how is this building built? That really would never have done. I remember 20 years ago, you might have had buyers saying, is this block built or is this timber frame? Just because their dad asked them to ask the question when they went to the
Yeah.
viewing. But it was the equivalent of tire kicking, essentially. But actually, that has changed. I think the conversation has moved on, and today's consumers, so even at an individual level, they've become so much more aware of how, not just what is being delivered in the built environment, but how it's being delivered. And I welcome that, even though it might be an uncomfortable transition, and we all need to get more comfortable in showing our homework, showing what's within the building. We're definitely getting to a place where there'll be greater transparency, which can only help as we're trying to really not just tell the story of a sustainable building and a sustainable built environment, but actually show what that really means and stand behind the metrics. I mean, you touched on certain certifications there, and we know that there are a range of commercial certifications and they can be problematic at best. Whereas actually, I think in terms of regulatory drivers, when we're trying to achieve and when as project owners and across the development community and indeed for main contractors and across their supply chain, we need to be really clear on the metrics that we consider important. We're in an era of data, but we probably haven't quite reached that era of insights and knowing what data is important. And I think that's part of the sustainability conversation that maybe still needs to happen. You've made the point many times that you are still delivering a GGBS product. do you think that that's something is that something that maybe you think is problematic across the industry now? Is it something they accept? Do you think that that cement is seen as maybe not a product that builders who are looking to build sustainably, are they finding this problematic?
I think that there's probably, it's like anything in life. If you've used something before, the fear goes out of it. And because GGBS is being specified in a lot of projects now, you'll find, when I saw this recently in Letterkenny, near where I'm from, GGBS was used in a project next to the Letterkenny General Hospital for the first time. And I was talking to the people involved, and there was a nervousness in using something new. But once they got the technical support from our team in Ecosem, they were much more confident in what they were doing. And for the next project and the next project, they'll have the experience of it. But there is that sort of nervousness in using, because people have been using cement for hundreds and thousands of years, and they're afraid that something different is going to happen. But if you look at the climate action plan from the government, has specified that the public works contracts must use low carbon cement in the public works. So we're waiting for guidance to come out from the Department of Enterprise that will implement that. But in the meantime, you see a lot of the government departments already specifying GGBS. So whether it's for the first time or they've been doing it for many years, I think that the market is really getting used to it as a low carbon cement product and how it works and how it interacts with Portland cement. You've also got in the private sector, in a lot of the developments across the city right now, particularly the commercial office developments, that a lot of them have 50% GGBS and 50% Portland cement. And, the cynic in me would say that a lot of that has been driven by the requirements of purchasers and tenants and funders who are saying we will not fund this unless it has sustainability credentials, or you've got the big American multinationals who won't purchase or be a tenant in a building unless they can see right down through the ingredients and that you've maximized the use of sustainable materials. So there's that sort of, I think GGBS has been around for a long time, but people are becoming more and more used to using it and getting confident that, it's no different in terms of the regular higher polluting Portland cement, and that they should use it as much as possible. There's different mixes. You could have 30%, 50%, 70%. You'll see a lot of 70% GGBS used in projects like offshore wind farms or sewage treatment plants or wind farms in general, or piers, that sort of thing. Infrastructural projects, you'll see a lot of projects having 70% GGBS, but a lot of the commercial projects would have 50%.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right when you talk about the fear of anything new. And look, we see that right across any sort of prop tech, construction technology, MMC. We see it across where there's any new innovation, new way of delivering the built environment. There's always going to be an element of nervousness, and that's, to be honest, that's not just natural and understandable. It's probably appropriate as well. We do need these things. We do need to approach, I suppose, with an element of caution, and that's what the testing and certification process is there to guide us through. And I do think it's interesting when you talk about the regulatory drivers. I don't think you're cynical at all to be able to point to what's driving that. The reality is, we saw when as ESG guidelines were coming in, actually, that's a conversation that's been going on for 8 or 9 years. It just wasn't until there was a force. So whether that force is funding or whether that force is a regulatory driver, sometimes that's what's needed to get the adoption levels to where we need to be. But I would like to think that, we were on the journey of trying to do the right thing in advance of that, which almost prepared the industry for innovation, for change, for the need to step back, look at how we're doing things and see how can we do them differently. And part of this comes back to taking a whole of project approach. So I would imagine for project owners and if you were in the position of project owner working in the development today, I think that you probably would need to know the materials that were going into the build. So I think that that's something that has just changed, and it's good that it's a positive thing that it's changing. But there's a transition process for sure. So in terms of Ecocem UK and Ireland, it's such an exciting company, such an exciting proposition. What does the future hold? I mean, obviously, I know the ACT technology. That's a really exciting development. And I would imagine there's more to come. But in terms of like a pipeline of innovation, given that so much of the company's focus is on innovation, what can we expect to see over the next decade from Ecosem?
Well, given that I'm just halfway through my first 90 days, I suppose I need to work more on that piece myself. But my understanding is that we will be making the act ourselves, or at least partnering with people who will. And then we will be licensing the ACT technology to companies across the globe. So we will continue in this space, but with a huge emphasis on innovation of products. And I understand we have a pipeline of products available that we're working through, different patents, etc. So we're not just a GGBS supplier. We are a GGBS supplier, but we're also a technology company. And that's where the focus for the future will be. And I suppose just in terms of the sales pitch for the locals, we do a lot of project support. So if a project wants to use GGBS for the first time, or they're unsure on anything at all, we have a team that can support and that we can send out to projects to give people technical support in the mixing and in the testing, and making sure that they're comfortable and confident in everything that they're doing. So it's not just the case that we sell GGBS and trucks and that's the end of it. We provide a lot of customer support for anybody that has any questions. So they should feel free to get in touch if they want to talk about it.
Very good. Thank you so much for taking us through that. And I think it's good for the industry to know what's available today, but also what's coming down the track. And I think that licensing opportunity is certainly something that sounds very interesting. So we hope that in a decade's time, it will be ACT technology that we see continuing to drive down the CO2 emissions of cement. So fantastic. Well done to the team there. And we look forward to checking in with you at a later time and watching how the innovation progresses, because it is a really exciting one to watch. So thank you so much for joining us, particularly when you are, as you say, only halfway through your first 90 days. Very unfair to ask you to give a decade-long forecast.
This is like the oral exam and the leaving cert, checking my knowledge.
Oh, do you know what? You're right. That really wasn't fair, but you know,
that's okay. I got up the ladder a lot quicker.
It is no, but you know what? It is such an exciting company that it's something I'm excited to watch. And I think it's amazing to see such pioneering technology, and I think it's something that gives us great hope about the future of a genuinely not just sustainable, but you know, net gain built environment. And that's something that I genuinely do get excited about. So thank you so much for taking the time to go through that with us today. I genuinely appreciate it. You're very welcome. Thank you. That was Sally-Ann Sherry, Managing Director at Ecocem UK and Ireland. My thanks as always to show producer Katie Tallon and to production team at Hear Me Roar Media. And also thanks to Place Engage for making these conversations possible. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of Breaking Ground. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.